and whites. That's how they traveled. They didn't have cars like we have today, you know. And we used the bus, and the train, you know, to go back and forth to school or wherever we had to go for the summer or whatever. Okay, much more than they do now. A lot of people fly today. All those people with the airports and stuff, they were originally at bus stations. All right, yeah. So the point we're making is that that was a common mode of transportation. So we were just going on the bus and riding, okay, in mass. It's called massive civil disobedience. So we weren't worried about whether or not we had raised the bond money before we went, okay? Or we had secured the lawyers. We went and took the action, and then we decided, okay, how would we respond to the treatment we got. So here in this bus station, for example, after Birmingham,
it's all right.
That's okay. We no longer needed parental permission on the core group because it was an organization established. Any students who were under 21 had to have parental permission. And I was scheduled to go on the original ride, but my parents wouldn't give me parental permission because they decided that
too dangerous.
They wouldn't. My father said, you know, I'm not going to sign your death warrant. Okay, so that meant I couldn't go on the original ride. But once the Freedom Ride got stopped, and because of the violence, and they were trying to find a cooling off period, that's what they were asking Robert Kennedy. Say, but y'all can just cool off for a while. We're trying to get you some protection, okay, from these southern governors and stuff like that. Because, you know, it's nothing we can do because we don't want to usurp our power from the federal government to give, you know, take away the law enforcement authority of the state and local governments in the South. Besides, they were trying to court, you know, the Democratic ticket, you know, and you have a lot of Democrats in the South. They didn't want to interfere with the concept of states' rights. So the state rights had to do with whether or not each state could discriminate against people and based on race. And the other issue was about federal protection. So these, as you saw in the film, Patterson said that he just lied, said he wasn't available and that kind of thing. Now the interesting thing you have to realize, I'm going to make 5 points of a stop. One is that while the United States government, like the president and attorney general, didn't want to interfere with states' rights, but looked like they were usurping and trying to take over. Okay, but that would only be met with resistance. All right, like, you know, we are a United States of America, but United States, but we're not totally the same. You could drive anywhere in the U.S., but you only get your license in one state, your driver's license. Why do they have a driver's license for the United States? And each of the tests are different. You know, they have reciprocity between some states, okay? If you're in Minnesota and you take the driver's test and you don't look back before you pull out a parking space, you don't get a license. I learned all that before I take the test. Okay? Then you can't use your side view mirror because it might not show who's coming. You got to turn your neck. And that's why folks in Minnesota, they can look backwards. Yeah, the peripheral vision is different because So anyway, each state has its own. So that's what people are struggling for. Even this whole business about same-sex marriage, okay? That whole issue, whether it's the states who decide that, or whether or decision for Texas. So that's the issue we were dealing with here on the Freedom Riders. So when we arrived here, the assumption was that once we left Birmingham, after all that ruckus and beating up people and all that kind of business, they were going to give us protection. But the governor himself did not want to interfere with, okay, the rights of the local police departments. So here the governor himself, right, that's why he hesitated about calling out the National Guard. Now, the mayor could, the governor could do it. Now the mayor couldn't do it. He didn't have that authority. The U.S. government and the governor of the state could do it. Well, they actually had promised that they were going to give protection to the Freedom Riders. And they did. From Birmingham, they had helicopters, cars, all that kind of stuff. Once we hit the city limits of Montgomery, there was only one motorcycle policeman.
Wow.
Escorting a bus to this bus station. When we saw that, I stood up and I knew there was going to be a problem. This was a Saturday. And Saturday, you know, hey, you know, people are everywhere. You know what I'm talking about? So it was kind of eerie feeling. And I stood up and I told the guardsman, he was the commander of the National Guard.
He's on the bus.
He's on the bus. All right? And they had rifles on the bus. I stood up and said, okay, I want all of you Freedom Riders to pick a partner and stick with that person no matter what happens. And the guardsman told me that he was in charge to sit down. Okay, the little skinny LaFayette. My pictures are over there so you can see how skinny I am. It's about 3 places, I believe. You'll get a chance to see it after I leave. I stood up and I looked at him and I told him, I said, you are in charge of the troops. I'm in charge of the Freedom Riders. He never had any little skinny black fellow telling him. So he was stunned. That's another, you know, way to do it in terms of unusual behavior. Okay. So he didn't know how to react to that. Okay. I didn't fuss at him. I just explained to him that I was, you know, in charge. He didn't know. He thought he was in charge of Freedom Riders. Okay. Well, he was there because we were there. All right. Yeah. So I'd say pick a partner and stick with that partner no matter what happens. But you will not go it alone. That's that whole business of community again. You've got to be able to have that established. Okay? So, once we arrived, we didn't realize until later that they had actually blocked off streets all around. I don't know how many blocks. Okay? We arrived in the back of the station, back there, and
Pulled in on the side.
yeah.
You can't get in there anymore that way.
No, you can't go in.
But you pulled around back.
Yeah, around the back. And we were not going to test the facilities when we arrived. The plan is, when you come into a city like Montgomery, the plan was, the original plan, and John Lewis had it, that you only stop and you have rides waiting for you, local people, and you go and meet with them, which again was the other purpose of the Freedom Ride. That was to give stimulation to local movements. Very fact, we were arriving and we would have a mass meeting, we would stay overnight, okay, and then we would test the facility on the way out as we were leaving. The psychology behind that is that if you were on your way out, they might just let you go ahead and be served to get you on out of town because, you know, there was only a short span. Okay, they didn't have to worry about you sitting in for no whole day, whatever. You ride, right? But that was not the case. When we arrived, the cars that were supposed to pick us up were not there.
Oh.
Okay? Only one black cab. And the cabs were segregated. That meant if a black driver of okay, could not carry a white person, especially a black man driving a cab with a white woman. Well, that was a big no-no. That was like signing your death warrant. But that's how serious it was, or how crazy, okay? So, when we got off the bus, two things happened. One is that a mob came out of the bus station, and that mob started beating up the reporters. They ignored us. I was there when they knocked that cameraman down and kicked him. They smashed the camera over his head. I don't know what would happen to him. You know what I'm talking about? But they were vicious. Now, I'm going to give you a chance to ask some questions because these are things you want to remember. Huh?
Were those reporters all local?
No.
No, so they were
In
from all...
fact, when we were in Birmingham and we got a bus coming here, reporters got them a bus. Okay?
Wow.
And they're black and white reporters.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure they were integrated bus.
Are they from all over
Private
the world,
bus.
like in Europe as well as the United States?
I don't know how many were out of the country by this time. There might have been some foreign reporters as well. But they took the bus and went ahead of us. They beat us here. So they were waiting to film our arrival. You see, they were, on the scene. So they were all there in a group. That's the group that they attacked. They never touched us when they came out. So when that happened, I said, well, somebody should be able to live to tell what happened. So I said, okay, all the girls, get in the cab. There were about 5 or 6 of them, And they went and they got in the cab. Because I was spokesman, but, I don't care about whether people know I'm the spokesman. As you can tell, I don't care nothing about that. It's something that's happening that you need to take charge of, then that's what leadership is. Take charge. Okay? So I told them to get in the cab. And when those white girls, about 2 or 3 of them, got in the cab, the black cab driver jumped out. And this was why the mob was beating up the reporters. He wasn't afraid of, being there as a black person. But to have some white women in his cab, that was sure death. He was shaking like a leaf. Now, he was willing to help us, you understand what I'm talking about? But to what extent, all right? So I said, man, get back in that cab and get these people out of here. So he said, I can't take these white girls. So I said, oh, goodness. I had to think fast. I said, okay, well, just take the black ones. Somebody needs to survive so they can tell what happened. When the white girls got out of the cab, Catherine Burt, who was Catherine Brooks now, okay, she's still around. She's the one that told Bull Connor, I'll see you at high noon. Okay. Remember that one? Yeah, she was always like that. Like that today. She stood up outside of the cab and looked at me. And while people are mob beating up folks, she's having an argument with me. She said, do you think we're going to get in the cab and take off and leave y'all here with the white girls? She said, no. If they're not going with us, we're not going. But my little plan didn't work. Okay. So I said, okay. So I told the cab driver, you should go. Okay. So I said, hey, nobody's going to ride in the cab, so you might as well go. We're not going to get in the cab and leave because, you got to stay here and do it. So I said, okay, everybody join hands and sing We Shall Overcome. And that's how we were attacked, singing We Shall Overcome. They waded in and beat people up and that kind of thing, etc. You saw the film, so you know they tried to put a lead pipe down, William Barbie's ear.
Don't cross over.
Okay, well, they knocked William Barbie down. This was a student at American Baptist College. I think he was a freshman from Nashville. And this guy put his foot. I was there when all this happened, when Jim Sword was beaten. In fact, it was only last year that I explained to Jim Sword that they picked him up and knocked him over this rail that a bus comes in several times. You see, he was knocked out the first time.